Normally when I'm reassembling the diaphragm, I'm reassembling it onto the plate, the fixed plate, which is the fixed pivot plate. Here I've got to reassemble this onto the moving plate because the fixed pivot positions are all in the case. So this is awkward, and it may or may not work well, because basically I've got to get all of these pivots to drop into the holes in the case there when I put the case over the top, and that may not go smoothly. These blades, you should note, are not symmetrical. The rivets at one end are shallower than the rivets at the other. The shallow rivets go into this plate. The taller rivets go into the body. If you mix it up, it won't go well for you. You'll end up with the pivots sticking through the plate and potentially catching on shutter blades on the other side. Okay, so I've got those blades in. I've got to pull these ones back so I can insert the last 4 blades. You can see I'm using a toothpick here to help me manipulate these blades. Last one to go. Now, because the pivots that I'm putting in place here are going into the slots, not into the holes, it means that the blades are not as fixed in position as they would be. So that means it's going to be awkward. I've got to lift this blade over the top without disturbing anything, and that blade's already moved. It's not seated in its slot. That blade's not seated correctly, it's catching on something. That one is too, so I've got 2 blades at least that have popped out of place. So that's turning into an utter disaster. That blade's moved right around from where it should be. Okay, start again. That was rubbish. That's not going to work. I'm going to have to approach this a different way, which probably means assembling it in the case. So I've got to put the long pivots into position in the case. And I will start there. It's as good as any. And the shallower pivots need to be sticking up because they'll run through the plate. It's very frustrating if you do this entire job and get everything assembled and then discover you've got one of your blades upside down, and these things happen. Right, that's the last of the easy blades, because now I've got to get the other blades underneath the existing blades. So first I'll get them ready, flipped around the right way so that I can pick them up with least problems, because I don't want to have to do this twice. Or having done it twice, so I don't want to have to do it a third time. So now I've got to get the next blade under the existing blade and into its hole. Like that. And again. You can see why you need decent tweezers to do this job, because you're hanging on to almost nothing and you're trying to manipulate that blade under there. It's not going to want to go. See if I can lift that out, give myself a bit of room. No. The recess is too deep there for me to be able to lift that easily. It must just about be there, but I can't get it to find the hole. Was that it? That's it. So that blade's in place. And I've got two more to go. It's difficult to get it under the leading edge of that blade. So I'm going to push it right around. That's it. So I've got one more blade to get in. I'll pull that one forward so I can get under the edge of it easier. I've just disturbed the blade underneath that. Okay, that's not looking good. Okay. Right, start again, attempt number 3. I have to think about this one, there's got to be a better way. I went back and had another attempt at the other method and I didn't like the result any more than this. So now I'm going to have a go. I've had another go at this and I've got those blades more or less in position, but some of them are not correctly placed. So I'll see if I can get my moving plate on the top and then manipulate the blades into place. That's just about it. I've got a couple over here that are not dropped, and okay. I think I've got my blades located. I can see I've got that ring on the wrong position at the moment, but I think I'll be able to lift that off and put it back where it came from. I'm going to remove my depth of field scale from the side because it might just prevent me moving my ring back into place correctly there. Take that off there. It is symmetrical. It should be there. And some of those blades are certainly not sitting where they should, which can only mean that they're not sitting in their sockets. That looks just about doable there. I'll put that jig under there to hold it. I'm looking underneath to see if I can see anything interesting. Yeah, none of those rivets are in place. They're all just sitting there. Well, some of them are seated and others are not. I don't normally have this much trouble getting these together, so there's This one's just an awkward example. Yeah, look, that's just all out of place. Well, I think that this is not going to be a very useful demonstration of how to achieve this because I'm not achieving it. I'll be back once I've made some progress. Well, it's 10 minutes later. On my next attempt, everything went as well as you could hope. Now I've got a diaphragm that moves smoothly. The limit stop here at f3.5 is a hard stop on that scale. That's why I took the scale off to allow me to fit the blades through at the fully open position. But there you can see the blades move smoothly. There's no oil or grease on them. No visible corrosion either for that matter. So that's a success, I think. I'll claim that as a success even though it took me about 4 or 5 attempts. I did get there in the end, I suppose. That's all that counts. If you get there in the end, you're good to go. Now here's our shutter. Let's get the shutter and the case married together. Now there are 3 holes here. They are not symmetrical, so if I line them up, the holes I see here in the case, we should be good to go, I think. 1, 2, 3. Let's have a look at that. Does that look right? That looks right. Okay, so I'll fit the 3 screws. So this one was more of a nuisance than usual. I'm not 100% sure why that should be. There were certainly minor differences in manufacturing techniques between models. As you can see, the shutter's nice and snappy in its action. That looks very good. Check I've got my 3 case screws done up tight. Check again that everything moves freely. That looks very good. Okay, finally, now I can clean up the remaining stuff and put it back in the shutter. All our internal componentry is somewhat grimy, but nothing looks damaged. It should work well. And the retard gear train seems to run smoothly too, so that's all a bonus. Let's start putting some things back in this shutter. I think I'll start with the B lever. And that's held in place with a shoulder screw. You want to be careful not to over tighten that screw. What happens if you over tighten it is that the shoulder on the screw burrows into the aluminium of the mechanism plate, and then of course it's no longer providing a fit surface for the lever to run around. The lever is trapped underneath it and doesn't move. Just get this high-speed spring in place. That's the 500th of a second spring. Our return spring, I'm just putting a wipe of molybdenum paste through the centre of that, sits on this post. Make sure that B lever tucks underneath it. Get the spring tucked down in the body. That's it. Sorry you didn't see any of that, I didn't see much either. Let's get a set of transparent fingers, make it easier to do some of this work. The shutter release lever sits on there. Now, I've got the catch. Excuse me. Right, this catch goes on. Now there are a couple of methods that have been used for providing the spring for this catch. This one must be tucked around the other way. Spring must go right over the top like that. That's better. Okay, so that sits there like that. Is held in place with a single screw. That spring tucks down into the case. That looks good. Well, that is ready to have the main lever put into it now. Okay, I'm applying a little bit of molybdenum paste to a couple of spots here. And the lever here that the main lever runs against on the tip of that catch would be useful. On my shutter release there, that should suffice for that. Now where's our main lever? Alright, molybdenum paste around the inside, around the outside edge, and on the bird paw. This piece is called the bird paw. The tail is where it runs down that, guides down that path there. Alright, that looks good. I'll get the main lever in place, hold back the pallets, swing that back out of the way, get that catch back out of the way. That should be good. So that spring's tucked in under there. Get the spring seated. While I'm catching on something here. Alright. Spring hooked over its post. That looks about right. It's not sitting down flat. That'll probably hold down when I've got the speed settings cameraing on place. Around the centre and around the cam surfaces, and where the high speed spring runs, I'm just making sure that's seated correctly. Yeah, it looks okay. That's only set when you set this to 300th of a second. Let's put this in place. And my catch is not dropping in. Oh, it's it's not sitting correctly in the shutter release there. That's better. Let's try that now. That should be B. This should be 1 second. Sounds credible. This should be a 10th. Yeah, it could be a bit fast. The 25th. That's certainly fast. Alright, I'm going to put the cover plate on that and go and test this. It's always unusual to get a shutter that runs fast is a bit suspect. Sometimes it means that people have taken a dirty shutter and adjusted the speed train to try and make it work correctly, which of course, yeah, that's definitely fast. I'll have to find out how much fast. Yeah, sometimes people will alter the speed train to try and make a dirty shutter work correctly, which of course is completely back to front. You only ever make adjustments on a freshly serviced and completely clean shutter, because otherwise you're just wasting your time. That would just be a foolish thing to do. I'll go away and test this, find out what I've got, see how much those speeds are out, and then make my decision about adjusting them if required. I can see somebody played with that speed train because the pin on the retard gear train had certainly been bent over, and that would have acted to change the speed.